do this. So this is a little half sheet of paper. There is no backside. So this is kind of the gist of what you did yesterday on your video notes. But of course, if you did not finish the video notes, please make sure that you finish them as soon as we finish the starter, okay? So I want to find the slope. Does anyone remember when I have a picture, what do I do to calculate slope? Mason.
I'm pretty sure you find 2 points.
You're making it complicated. Yes, you can, but that's just a lot more work than I want to do. Yes, thank you. Rise over run. So if I don't see points, I have to draw my own points. And where you're going to draw points, and I'm sorry, I think that for this one, this was a really bad example because you can't really see exactly where it hits the corner. It's a little bit, I think the printing has just made, over time, has made it very blurry. So I would, honestly, I don't even know if there's any that really hit the corner. They all look a tiny bit off. But on a test or a quiz, it would be very clear where you can draw a dot. So let's just draw a dot here, and let's just draw a dot here. I know they're a tiny bit off, but what I really want you to know is the way that you find slope when you have a picture. The easiest way is to just do rise over run. You could do what Mason said and find 2 points and do the formula, but that's just a lot more work than I want to do right now. So I normally start from the bottommost point so that I can rise. So from the bottommost point, I rise 2, I run over 1, 2, 3. So my slope is 2/3. If you can simplify the fraction, you can, but let me double check. Okay, so let me put this in the calculator, 2/3. Remember to type in a fraction, you go alpha y equals enter. 2/3, it says on my calculator, equals 2/3, so it can't be simplified. So it's 2/3. Now, remember how I said yesterday, you can write it as a decimal if you really want to, but 2/3 is 0.6. So here's the rule. If it's repeating, you cannot write it as a decimal. If it's not repeating, then you can write it as a decimal. But honestly, just leave it as fraction. It's not a big deal. Okay, so my first answer is 2/3. I know not all of you got 2/3 because the dots are a little unclear. So the biggest thing I want you to know is it's just rise over run. All right, number 2. Now I have 2 points. Does anyone remember a formula perhaps? What do we have? Ashlyn. Good. You didn't sing it though, Ashlyn. Okay, so here's my formula. Y sub 2 minus y sub 1 divide x sub 2 minus x sub 1. That's my formula. So when I do this, where am I getting my y's and my x's? Remember, I always have an x and a y and an x and a y when I label. But here's my first one, and here's my first one. Here's my second one. Here's my second one. If I really wanted to reverse them and say x2, y2 here, and then x1, y1 here, that's fine too. Okay, so now let's plug it in. So Grayson, on top, it's what minus what?
-6 minus 6.
Thank you. Sienna, on the bottom, it's what minus what?
0 minus -4.
Thank you for saying 0 minus -4. It's not 0 minus 4, it's 0 minus -4. Okay, there are so many negatives in this problem. I'm really afraid I'm going to make a silly mistake with negatives or with simplifying. So the easiest thing that I want you to do is just type it in your calculator. So this looks like a big fat fraction. Hit alpha, y equals, enter. So on top you have -6 minus 6. On the bottom you have 0 minus -4. If you type it in exactly like the problem says, boom, it'll simplify for you. It'll do all the negatives for you. You won't have that problem. So my final answer is -3, and it was simplified for me. Whee! So that's how I find slope if I have 2 points. Yes, Luke?
They're asking for that. Would you put that as fraction form or just keep it as -2?
Instead of writing -3/1, you're saying? I mean, you could really write -3/1, but I guess it'd be easier just to write -3. You're saving some lead. But if you write -3/1, I would not mark it wrong. But if it was like 3/6, that would be wrong because that can be simplified. Does that make sense? Okay. Yes, Sienna?
If you did put like 0 minus 4, would it get a different answer?
Yeah. So if you put 0 minus 4, let me just show you. So do you see how I just wrote 0 minus 4 here? Do you see how it changes the entire like symbol? So I mean, You might not think it's a big deal because it's just a negative symbol, but it changes your line. Your line's going down here, but your line's going up here. So be very, very careful with the symbols. Okay, now I have a table. How do I find the slope if I'm given a table? Does anyone remember? Garrett?
All right, so like you take 2 points, like 1 and 7, and 3 and 11.
Can I take any 2 points?
Yes.
Yes, it does not matter. Okay, and then what?
And then you do y2 minus.
You gotta
1.
sing
Sing
it,
it.
Garrett. Come on,
Sing it
if
right now,
anyone is
Garrett.
going to sing it, it would be you in this class.
Let's go. I volunteered to do this. All right. Why am I obligated to sing?
Because I feel like you have a beautiful voice that just needs to be released.
Do it, kid.
I've heard you sing.
No, you haven't. That is false.
All right. Garrett's feeling a little shy right now. If that's even possible. I'll sing for him. Okay, it goes like this. Y sub 2 minus y sub 1 divide x sub 2 minus x sub 1. I mean, you sing this song since you're like 1 year old, guys. You know this song. It's not like I'm asking you to sing some opera, right? All right, so now when I plug in the numbers, Emily, on top, it's what minus what?
11 minus 7.
Thank you. And then on the bottom, Cooper, it's what minus what?
It's 3 minus 1.
Yes. So please remember, if you just put it in your calculator as a big fat fraction, it's just going to simplify for you. It's going to do the negatives for you. It honestly, it saves you a little bit of, I don't know, silly mistake. Like if you make a silly mistake, but it's 2. Now, keep in mind what we said. If you didn't want to choose these 2 points, you could choose any 2 points. Honestly, I like to choose the smallest numbers. I like to choose the whole numbers. I like to choose the positive numbers. That's just my preference, but it's your call. Okay, let's move on. Find the slope and the y-intercept. So remember, when I have y equals mx plus b, does anyone remember which letter here is going to be the slope? Vaughn? The slope?
Oh,
M. So no worries. So the M is going to be my slope, which means my B is going to be my y-intercept. So if there's any confusion, this is what I normally do. Y equals mx plus b. I just put it right under. I mean, you really don't have to, but this is what I teach my 8th grade math kids because they're learning it for the first time. And then I circle my M and then I circle my B. Rowan, what number here is my slope?
That would be -4.
Thank you for saying negative. It does make a difference because if you were to say positive, that means my line's going up, but it's not. All right, Kip, what number is my y-intercept here? 6. You can write it as 6 or you can put 0, 6. Either one is fine. Okay. Ooh, this one. I can't just line it up and write y equals mx plus b because it's not in that form yet. Mason, what do I have to do?
Pretty sure the 0 is the one, right? Or like.
The 0 is the y equals. No,
Oh,
the y is actually this y.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so this is what, okay, so does anyone know what I would have to do in this problem first? Vaughn?
Add 4y to the other side.
So basically Vaughn is saying solve for y. I have to solve for y first. Vaughn is adding 4y instead of adding x and minusing 8 because she's thinking, oh, well, the y is negative, so let's just add it over to make it positive, and then I'll just divide by 4. So I have negative x, which is negative 1x, plus 8 equals 0 plus 4y is just 4y. So now what I can do is divide by 4. Now, this is the biggest mistake you guys are going to make. You always forget that when I divide an entire side by 4, this gets divided by 4 and that gets divided by 4. So does anyone think they know what the final equation looks like? You're just dividing that side by 4, that side by 4. Well, there's a 2 in there, but there's more than that. Luke, what do you think?
Would it be, negative 0.25?
Okay, so negative 0.25 is the same thing as saying negative 1/4. Luke, you picked up a calculator, you changed it into a decimal. You just took an extra step. we can just realize 1 divided by 4 is just 1/4, right? I mean, you could, Luke, you could say negative 0.25 and it would be fine. But normally in this chapter, we're going to graph it after. So you want to know how many you rise and how many you run. So then if you leave it as negative 0.25, then you would say, like, if I were to ask you to graph it, then you'd be like, oh, I got to change it back to a decimal. So just save yourself that step. Okay, keep going.
Oh, and then plus two.
+2. Okay, so there should be an X somewhere.
Oh, negative 1 plus X.
Yeah. Okay, so that's how I solve for Y. We kind of did that in the first chapter when we had to solve for so many letters. You definitely did this last year. Okay, so basically divide everything by 4. -1 divided by 4 is just -1/4. 8 divided by 4 is 2. So now that I have this, I can figure out what is my slope and what is my y-intercept. So does anyone think they know what number is the slope here? What number is the y-intercept here? Luis is the, and Luis, what's the y-intercept? 2. Thank you. 0, 2 or just 2. It's a +2, so remember it's a +2. Okay. Next one. Oh, this one's kind of tricky. Well, not as tricky as number 7, but okay. So does anyone think they know? Emily, go.
The slope is 0.
Yes, ma'am. And
the y-intercept is 2.
yay. Okay. So this is how I would think of it. It's still in y equals form, but it's just y equals 2. So why don't I write it in y equals mx plus b form? Can't I technically say that y equals 2 is the same thing as saying y equals 0x plus 2? Because I don't see any x's here. So y equals 2 is the same thing as saying y equals 0x plus 2. Then I can say, here's the slope, here's the y-intercept, okay? Or what you could really do if you just can't figure it out is graph it. So I have y equals 2. Oh, y equals 2. I'm going to, oh, darn it. I still had that example from yesterday. Hold on, let me clear it. Okay, so here's y equals 2. I would say, oh, my slope is 0. Remember, horizontal line, you can draw a z with it. That's why the slope is 0. And what's the y-intercept? Where does it touch the y-axis? At 2. Okay. Number 7, you get lots of brownie points if you know how to find this one. It's not the same thing because this one says x equals, not y equals. All right, Kip, try. Nope.
Slope is 0.
Nope. Jack.
Slope is 1.
Let Jack answer. What? 1? No. Fine.
Oh.
Okay. Luis?
I'm confused on why it's still a y-intercept and not that type.
You're confused as to why what? Well, because the directions say find the slope and the y-intercept. So that's why I'm finding it. All right. Garrett?
All right. And this is going to sound crazy. Might be completely wrong. But since like the x-intercept is 4, it's like a vertical line there. So there is, the rise is infinite, isn't it?
Yeah.
And there's no run.
Yeah. So what's the answer?
So there's infinity
Nope.
over.
No.
Infinity. I don't know.
No. Cooper.
Would it be undefined?
It would be undefined. Yeah. Okay. And then does any, and I'll tell you why later. I'll explain in a minute. But does anyone think they know the y-intercept trick question?
There is no
trick question?
y-intercept.
Raise your hand. Raise your hand. Let other people try, Jack.
There is no
So if there is no y-intercept, hold on. This is an important question because kids get confused. If there is no y-intercept, which is true, should I write 0 because there's none?
No.
No, because 0 is an actual number. So what do I write if there is no y-intercept?
Nothing.
Undefined.
No, I can't write undefined. I would just write none
Not available.
or no or something like that. Okay, let me explain why these two answers make sense. If I were to graph x equals 4, okay, the graph of x equals 4 is right here. I go to x, 1, 2, 3, 4. Here's the dot on x equals 4. So can we all agree that the graph of x equals 4 is a vertical line like that? So remember how we said that the slope of a vertical line, because you can draw a U, is going to be undefined. Vertical lines always have a slope of undefined. And then y-intercept, where does it touch the y-axis? Never. It never does because it's parallel, so it's none. So the biggest thing you guys have to know, you don't have to write this down if you don't want to, but is this, for slopes, okay? Horizontal lines have a slope of 0. Vertical lines have a slope of undefined, okay? Because you can draw a Z and you can draw a U. That's just basically my trick, okay? But horizontal lines have a slope of 0. Vertical lines have a slope of undefined.